I'm here.
Dave Kelly.
Here.
Steve Schultz.
Here.
Paul Arena. I saw him say here. He's messing. You're good.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, that's better, Paul.
Can you hear me now? All right, thanks.
Gene Crosby.
Here.
Jim Webster.
Here.
Jazz Billich. I see Jazz screen. You still with us, Jazz? Mr. Billich, rather, excuse me. Either way, we still have a quorum, so we'll continue moving forward. Invocation, running down the agenda. The item 13, unfinished business. Is there any discussion regarding the Mike Sablaski appointment? Seeing none, I'll continue. The Understanding Committee reports, Finance Committee. They have Mr. Segato, of course, not here. Ordinance to modify the 2019 property tax late tax penalties. Mr. Arena, can you speak to this, please?
Yes, I think the only other issue that came up is Ms. Crosby brought up another program that we might want to cite as qualifying, or that they applied for assistance under. And I've spoken with about it morning, not heard back about adding that in as a possible, one other criteria. But other than that, I think we're set on it, unless somebody has a concern or has a request for a change. The only other thing I should bring to everyone's attention is the General Assembly did pass a law and signed that's permissive, that allows counties to waive penalties for all taxpayers, but and it also pushes the tax sale back into next year. So that'll apply to us. But Kerlinkus said that because we adopted this under the previous law, which is still on the books, that we're okay with the structure that we have put together. But there might be, someone might say, well, why aren't we buddy? And the reason was financial, pretty much, that, when we put this together, we were trying to balance the need for revenue with giving relief to people who need it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Arena regarding this one? Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was the only no vote, and it just has to do with manpower and workload. And it's not because I feel super strongly about the issue. I just think at a time when we're dealing with challenges, I'm concerned about the amount of work that it's going to add. But if I'm the only no vote, it's not going to offend me.
Thank you for the input.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. And just so that everyone knows, I did have multiple conversations with the auditor to make sure that he was comfortable with what was going on, and he's been involved in putting together the application. So he's aware, and he seems okay with it.
Good. Any other questions for Mr. Arena about this subject? We'll move on then to zoning, Mr. Webster.
No zoning. We're dead in the water.
Thank you, sir. Economic development, Mr. Billich. You back with us, Jazz? We'll give him a chance to circle around. Next is operations administrative. We do not have anything. Move us on to public works. I think, Mr. Kelly, historically, you've been filling us in on public works. Can you help us again tonight?
Hang on a second. I got to look at my other computer and.
I can read them off for you if that helps.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Wait. I might have it right here. A resolution authorizing the award of a bid for the second 2020 county general letting That's a typically annual thing. Unit prices for miscellaneous materials the highway department buys. Next one is a resolution awarding quotes for supplying electricity for traffic signals and highway lighting, rate to be locked in on May 28th, and speaks for itself. And finally, a resolution authorizing execution of construction inspection guidance agreement with Fairgrand and the appropriation of MFT funds for the purpose of assisting county staff for the construction inspection of the widening and resurfacing of Baxter Road to Mulford Road at a cost of not to exceed $150,000, half of it for the county.
Are there any questions for Mr. Kelly regarding those? My question would be, I know we're looking to do a $4 million bond. I'll come to you in just a second, Mr. Schultz. Mr. Kelly, we're looking to do a $4 million bond. So is this $150,000 going to be above and beyond that $4 million bond?
I do not believe so.
Thank you. Mr. Schultz, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple quick things. One, getting the bids the night of the board meeting is something we've talked about in the past. Just it gives almost no time, to actually look at the content and to try to understand it. And I don't pretend to be, even after almost 12 years, an expert, but I like looking at it. The other comment is just this whole thing about Fairgram and other, engineers that we hire at, in some cases, a lot of money. The topic has come up repeatedly in my time on the board around, okay, we have county staff, county highway staff, engineers. So why do we have to go out and get help? And, that the answer generally is, well, because we don't have the staff to do it. And that always feels a little flat, like it needs a little more dimension. And so not as an urgent item, but I think at some point it would be helpful if the board gave Carlos a little bit of time to help us add more flesh to the bones around, why do we hire outside engineers when we have engineers of our own? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. And I agree with your point. I think I'll get you in just one moment, Mr. Kelly. We were putting a roof on one of our buildings not long ago. We're going to pay so many thousands of dollars for some architectural stuff. I think you're right, Mr. Schultz. Mr. Boomer's the one that turned me on to it. First of all, is why are we paying somebody to inspect the work we've already done? Why wasn't it done properly to begin with? Why are we spending all these dollars possibly without need? Mr. Kelly.
Yes, a lot of it's to do with, it's for inspection of the work that's been done. That involves testing, taking cores of the asphaltic pavement to ensure that they're putting the right amount of asphalt down, testing compaction. There's numerous tests that need to be done that the county doesn't have anybody to do it. And that's a lot of it.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Webster.
Yeah, I think what Mr. Kelly is saying there is that, and I've thought this many times over the years as well, but when you think about it, there's so many types of engineers, okay? So back in the day, you had an engineer that ran the train, you got bridge engineers, you've got engineers, they call them there for you're at the works at the landfill. You've got engineers of all different categories there. And so we don't have engineers to fill every one of those slots. If we did, we'd probably have to have 100 engineers on staff for the various things that come up. And so oftentimes we're relegated to having this farmed out to an outside source. And the only, the only confidence I guess I can have in that is that the engineering staff that we do have has guided us towards the outside engineering that we can get the most bang for our buck and the ones that are reliable and so forth, and that are certified to do that type of engineering. Thank you.
Does anybody know, like the other municipalities, Durand, Sterling, Roscoe, Rockton, Rockford, do they also hire a Fairgram or do they have their own people? Does anybody know that answer, Mr. Kelly?
Most,
All I know is that Fair Graham is pretty well respected, and they do a lot of work for just about every entity, maybe 10 counties wide. I mean, they're a huge firm and they do a ton of business, guys. I mean, I've used Fair Graham for our development, so they're a superb company.
And I'm not questioning if they are. I just want to make sure we're spending our dollars the best that we can. I have Mr. Kelly and then Mr. Webster. Mr. Kelly.
Am
Yeah,
I
Mr.
on?
Kelly. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. I've been in construction, more like building construction, but it also involves site work and whatnot for more than 30 years. And we've used Fairgram constantly during my entire career
Thank you. Mr. Webster.
under numerous firms.
yes, thank you. I don't want to comment on any particular company. I just want to comment that what you brought up there, Keith, about do smaller communities have engineers? No. Durand, they don't have any engineers. They have a guy that runs the wastewater treatment plant there, has a degree in running a wastewater treatment plant, but no, he's certainly not an engineer of any sort. And in times past, there's many times when our county highway engineers are able to help our smaller communities. I'll give you an example. Pecatonica, a few years ago there, the Pecatonica Park District and that wanted some help with the path and so forth out there, and were terminated at Peck at the time. And they wanted some help. Well, we couldn't help them financially, but we did help them with engineering and so forth with that parking lot. I had done some personal work for them myself, and so got them all involved with their former chairman and that. And he said, yeah, I think we can get our county highway engineers to help out, at least with designing a parking lot, gravel parking lot. And so those things are altogether different than some of the many other types of engineering that we're required to do. And if our engineers aren't certified to do some particular thing, then if something goes to hell on that project, we lose our federal or our state funding as well. So I guess there's a lot of reasons we have to spend more money. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you for that input. Does anybody else have anything for Public Works? Seeing none, I see Mr. Jazz Billich is back with us. Jazz, do you have anything for economic development?
No, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, actually, I have nothing on economic development. We did go over some discussion in regards to how the committee will like to see us going forward in future asks and so on in regards to host fee funds. We discussed about the fact that we have the plan just actually getting finalized. Thankfully, Chris is back to working on a lot of the economic development side of things. I apologize. And that we're going to be looking at actually doing a lot of the, instead of doing host fee gives, trying to offset them with tax abatements. So aside from that, we also will have a list of the annual gives that we'll be looking at very shortly here. And that list is going to be forwarded out, and we're going to have that meeting next week.
Thank you, Mr. Billich. Any comments for Mr. Billich? Seeing now, we'll move on to public safety. Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chairman. As a committee, we have no report, although I will be in touch with the sheriff's office before Thursday night's meeting to get a COVID update on it in regards to inmates. Again, there's no other committee report, but that does allow me to segue right into something that I mentioned in the last meeting about proclaiming Winnebago County open. I've been working slowly and carefully with this subject with Mr. Kurlinkus. I've been hearing some rumors that Governor Pritzker may extend, or he's threatening to extend. I don't know the veracity of those rumors, but I don't know. I'm just wondering. I appreciate the caucus to give some input, especially from our veteran board members on this. But as far as proclaiming Winnebago County open, it doesn't supersede or override a governor's order. But I think it's about time. As of Friday, of all the tests that Winnebago County has conducted, there's been 1,684 positive tests of COVID. There's been 12,896 negative tests and well over 500 recoveries. I don't like hearing the possibility of Governor Pritzker extending this close down order when I myself went to Wisconsin over the weekend and saw numerous Illinois license plates, and I heard the same from friends that went to Iowa. So it's time. We've got to save our small businesses. We've got to begin our opening. We've got to do what we can. And if I make a motion for a proclamation on Thursday night, I don't know. Again, I'm asking for input from our caucus here, I guess, and I'm proceeding with that. Thank you.
I see. And just one quick thing, you do have a resolution extending the police services of McChesney on the agenda.
Yes, that's correct. Thanks for the correction. I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. And yeah, that was supposed to be a closed deal at the end of May, and this is just an extension. Evidently, McChesney Park still was not at this moment ready to sign the agreement. So if we extend until the end of June, that's what I'll be asking for the board's approval on that resolution. Thank you.
Mr. Booker, do you happen to know if the contract is currently at McChesney or the state's attorney's office?
State's attorney, I see Mr. Kalenkas is online. I don't know if he's there or not. He's up on the screen.
Chairman.
Mr. Kalenkas?
Yes, the contract, to answer your question, the contract is with McChesney Park. It was sent, I just checked my calendar last week. It was sent there on April 16th, and I've received no response.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kalenkas. Mr. Schultz, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, I'm also getting a lot of calls, a lot of emails saying need to open up. And what the thing that's circulating in my mind, and maybe this is what you have is intended, Mr. Booker, but I do think that just the Wisconsin approach where, the Republican Party got passed or got through the judge, okay, this isn't legal or whatever, and then it's now just full on open. I don't think that necessarily was a wise thing. I understand a lot of it was politics, but I'd like there to be something that replaces what the governor's rules are so that it has, even if it's just the statements around social distancing and wearing masks, when you have this less than 6 feet capacity, some general guidelines, because I think honestly, it makes us look a little more responsible and it also is protective of our community. And so, but as far as being open to us, you heard what I said at the last board meeting. I very much am for us taking action on something that would be less restrictive than the governor has proposed. But it sure would be good for that to be in writing so that we would be able to look at it and say, this is what our statement is as a substitute for what the governor's statement is.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Chairman. I listen to the updates every day that they're on, especially the county update. And Dr. Martell, I strongly believe, is trying to mitigate and moderate what the state is doing. As far as what Wisconsin's doing, my wife and I had our 50th anniversary on March 28th, and we could go nowhere. She wants to go to the Butterfly Club. I want to go too, but we're going to wait until it's safe.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Mr.
You just muted yourself, Paul.
That's to come out with some guidelines for, what responsible opening is, but have something in writing. I'm not actually sure what the next phase is, what the governor has in mind. I assume the end of May, right? We're passing into another phase, but I don't think that involves like being able to get a haircut. And there's these
Yes, it
contradictions
does.
that
Yes, it does.
so you can. So I guess that's part of the equation too. We're going to meet on the 28th. If we're making a statement that's going to be irrelevant in a few days after, we have to consider that as well. But, I don't think that they've done a great job of applying reason to the closures that they've made. And whatever has happened locally, I've talked to Chairman Haney about this. There's not been enough inclusion of us in these groups or in industries that I'm familiar with who've expressed concern to me. None of those people are included. So I don't put any confidence in whatever they're doing. So if it's necessary and we need to do something ourselves, I'm fully supportive of that. But I think we do have to have some order to it. Thank you.
Agreed. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. I think that guidelines, as Steve pointed out, I think guidelines would be the proper, I don't know, term we want to use here. Guidelines I can accept, but an edict that tells me you will do this or you will do that under the threat of being, handcuffed and taken to jail, that's not right at all. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Wisconsin there now that they open things up all the way. And we'll find out in a couple of weeks, whatever, how many cases already blew up or what have you, if it's gone really crazy. But just to lay down the law that says you will do something because I'm the governor and I told you to do this, that's just not right. That flies in the face of a free society. And with that, I just can't agree. Thank you.
I agree with you, Mr. Webster. I got Mr. Kelly and then Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chairman. It comes down from the governor through the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity to the local health department. And Sandra Martell talked about it today. And she was talking about how there's vagaries in it. And it's kind of up to the local health department to interpret it. And I think she's trying to mitigate the restrictions to some extent that she can.
I fully support her mitigating those to the fullest capacity. Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Kelly did touch on the direction I was going with Dr. Martell. It is up to our local county health department on lifting or placing restrictions. So again, if it comes down to where we as a board ask Dr. Martell to start lifting some of the restrictions, I believe she has that authority to do that. And then just to finish off here, Georgia, the state of Georgia opened up before the 1st of May. So they're about 7 to 8 weeks in and open. They're in an open business down there, and Florida's been open for 4 weeks, and they have not seen any spike or any cause for real concern. So that's just something to think about as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. Anyone else wish to speak on this topic? Seeing none, and I agree, we should come up with something that we can collectively sign and present to the health department, showing what direction we think we should move into.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes, sir.
I just want to know that I'm online. This is Fred.
Duly noted, Mr. Westcott. Welcome.
Thank you.
Moving on to personnel and policies. Mr. Fiducia was here. Is he gone? I do not see him. Is anyone else on that committee able to talk? There's 3 resolutions. First resolution is affixing compensation and other benefits for certain elected county officials.
Yeah. That's something we have to do. So that's what that was all about. I think that discussion already took place last week at the combined personnel and policy and finance. And I think what came out of that, as I recall, was there'll be a wage increase for the auditor, and let's see what other office. And there won't be a wage increase for the chairman's position for 2 years. And the car will be taken away from the chairman, taken out of that payments
I think the corner was the other one, wasn't it, Jim?
package. Pardon me? Corner, maybe.
Wasn't
that
the
was it, yeah.
corner?
Yes.
Thank you.
I
Mr.
think
Kelly, did
Steve
you have your
was-
hand up?
Steve.
I'll
Schultz, you were-
confirm that. I'll confirm that. I'll confirm that.
Thank you. Mr. Webster, were you finished talking?
Sure.
Okay, thank you for your input on that. Any discussion on that item? Next resolution authorizing the chairman of the county board to execute an agreement with Gov Temps USA to extend Mr. Chapman's contract.
Yep, you just explained that one right there. That's just exactly what that was.
Any discussion?
We don't extend that, then we're without an administrator. So that'll be extended. And Mr. Chapman mentioned there that if we do come up with a new administrator before this prescribed time here, that he's more than happy to take 2 weeks' notice and walk off the job. So we're not indebted to him for any longer than we have to be.
Very good. I'm very grateful for Mr. Chapman's time here. I think he's terrific. A bit on the expensive side going through the agency, but I'm very glad that he's here. The last resolution, I see Mr. Fiducia is now here. We're down to item 4, Mr. Fiducia, if you want to take back over.
Okay, well, what we got, the compensation for elected county officials.
Yep, we covered that.
Okay, I'm just trying to catch up at where we were at.
We just finished talking about extension for Steve Chapman's contract. Now we're on to the airport.
Okay, I just got the correspondence from the state's attorney, and I sent it out. I don't know if all groups have it or not, but there's a correspondence that we want to send out to Mr. Dunn. If you'd like, I can read it to you guys. It says, Mr. Dunn, we are greatly disappointed in not a small amount of outrage that the county board received your recent communication to the county board member, Dorothy Redd. Mrs. Redd is an elected official serving on a public body, and your demeaning and insulting language to her was, to say the least, inappropriate. Terms like stupid and idiotic have no place in the dialogue, and the county board realizes your communication to Mrs. Redd is your opinion and not that of the airport board. The lack of respect you showed Mrs. Redd is not acceptable from anyone, much less someone who occupies the position that you do with the airport. Setting aside for the moment the disrespect you showed the county board members, your comments are poor reflections on the entire entity you lead. Mrs. Redd obviously understands the meaning of being a public servant. We encourage you to learn the same. You owe Mrs. Redd and the entire county board on which she serves an apology. In the future, we hope that your speech and your writings will be tempered with the professionalism and respect. And It would be very truly, and it would be the members that are voting on that. I'll send a copy out to everybody before the meeting. I think some of you may have gotten it already.
Thank you.
Any things you'd like changed on there, or?
I know Ms. Crosby had her hand up and Mr. Arena does. So Ms. Crosby, do you have?
You know, all I can say, guys, is Bustos thinks Mike Dunn walks on water. Durbin thinks Mike Dunn walks on water. When Mike Dunn had the stroke he had in 13, Durbin came up and spent the day with him. I don't know anybody in this call or Zoom meeting where Durbin would come and spend a day with. So I can't support this. You know, people call politicians stupid all the time. I mean, it kind of goes with the territory, guys. And it's time we put on our big boy pants and got over this kind of stuff. But I cannot support sanctioning somebody that's done so much for this community because Eli Nicolosi wants to have it done. And he's using your position, Mr. Fiducia, to carry his water. And I cannot support that under any circumstance.
Mrs. Crosby?
No.
Mrs. Crosby, I have had no contact with Eli Nicolosi or any of those people that you're claiming have done this. The only contact I have had was that of with Mrs. Red. And out of respect for Mrs. Red, I asked her what should be done, and this is what was recommended. Trust
Now
me,
that
during
that
this
you've
pandemic,
interrupted me, I
listen to
have
me,
the
listen to
floor.
me.
Fiducia,
During this pandemic,
Fiducia,
I understand
the
there's a shortage of toilet paper, and this is what this probably could be used for. But still, I think it's a gesture.
I have the
And
floor.
that
I have the floor. You don't have the floor, Mr. Fiducia. I have the floor. And for you to interrupt me is disrespectful. But I will tell you this, we will look like a bunch of buffoons. If you want to do that, gentlemen, go right ahead. I will not be a party to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crosby. And let's try to be mindful of who has the floor and when. It's a lot harder to intervene in the Zoom meetings, but let's try to be respectful of one another's time. Mr. Arena, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I fully support this. I disagree with I disagree with Mrs. Crosby's assertion that because Mike Dunn has relationships with other politicians, that somehow his behavior, any behavior, is permissible. I don't think that applies to anybody. So that doesn't persuade me. My one question is, it's good that we're communicating to Mr. Dunn that this is a problem. I wondered if the letter should have been addressed to the airport board, because we don't have authority over Mike Dunn, the airport board does. And so maybe that'd be a question for the state's attorney's office. Just who is the most appropriate target for the letter? Is it actually Mike Dunn, or should it have been the airport board? Thank you.
Mr. Kurlinkus, do you want to weigh in on that at all? If not,
Yeah, I gotta agree with you, Paul. I think that would be better too. You know, the airport board controls him and let them respond to his behavior.
thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Webster, your hand was up.
All right, had to find my mute. Yeah, I fully agree with everything Paul just said, and I think that'd be the appropriate way to go with this and send it to the Airport Authority Board. And yes, and I agree that a person can do you know, a lot of good things throughout their life, but when they step out of bounds and do something they shouldn't, yes, then you know they should. I don't know. They should be reprimanded for that. I mean, I feel like I've done a lot of good things in my life, but boy, when I've been wrong and I got hammered, yeah, I had to take the hammering and admit that, yep, I was wrong. Sometimes it's a bitter pill to swallow, but yeah, got to take it. Thank you.
Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Kurlinkus.
I'm sorry, I fumbled with the mute button. You can address the letter any way you want to. If the committee decides that they want to have it addressed to Mr. Dunn, I would believe I would suggest that you CC the board. Other way around, if you addressed it to the board, all of the board would receive copies of it. So either way, I would tend to agree that at some stage it's got to be presented to the airport board.
Thank you, Mr. Kurlinkus. Is there any other discussion on that matter? Brings us down to new business. I will tell you that I texted Chairman Haney at 4:45 this evening and asked him to put Mr. Mike Zintek on the agenda. He has since let me know that he's trying to get a hold of Amy or Stacy or somebody in the office to get it added to the agenda. As of now, that has not happened. But I did not reach out to Chairman Haney until late in the day, 4:45 to be precise, to ask him to do that. Mr. Webster.
Yes, thank you for doing that. I think that that's the proper thing to do, and put this issue behind us and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Is there any other discussion for this evening's caucus? Mr. Schultz?
You can decide, Mr. Chairman, if this is appropriate or not, but I just wonder if a conversation between you and Dr. Martell regarding the concerns that were expressed tonight might be the genesis of a document that she would be in agreement with and supportive of, that we could, move forward. I think it would be good for this county board to make a statement, even if she's in agreement with it, not just for political reasons, but to show support for our public and to show support for those that have been closed down for an extended period of time.
I like that, Mr. Schultz. I like that a lot. I will make that telephone call to Dr. Martell in the morning. Is there anyone else has anything for the greater good? Anybody with a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Second, Mr. Schultz. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Storm moving in behind me.
Yeah, be careful. Looks like it's coming in. You guys have a good night and thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Good night.